So we're working on the quad-plex today, but in this video we're going to be working on actually housing one of the snakes into the quad-plex. We can take it from beginning to end. The snake that we're going to be doing today is Hydra. She is a ball python, a female. I don't know what her morph is. I think it's a pastel, normal, something like that. I don't really care what morph she is. She's a beautiful snake regardless. So her enclosure we're going to be working on is this one here, the one that's currently missing a door. So let's get to it. So as you can see, we've got our blank canvas there. So the way we left the quad-plex last was we built the skeleton of it, we put the face boards on it, and we did the basic insulation. Now the insulation that's been installed is not to be carved. That is the insulation layer. We're going to be adding insulation to the insulation that's already in there. That's what we're going to carve. This is just going to act as a barrier to hold the heat and humidity within the enclosure easier. And once this quad-plex is finished, we will be determining that this caused the enclosures to hold heat too well. But we'll go over that later on. Right, now we're getting on to the actual building of the background itself. So what I've decided to do for this background is to have some kind of elevated platform. So instead of just using decorations to give them height, I want to give them kind of a platform that's more permanent. So that's what we're doing here. Now, because you've already seen me create a fair number of these backgrounds at this point, we did Greta and Gabby's. Okay, you've seen me do one. Oh, and the background wall. Yeah, you've seen me put the insulation on. So I've skipped that, and we're just going to go straight to the carving process, which, if you guys remember, is the most boring, long-winded, pain in the arse aspect of making bloody backgrounds. Especially if you don't have a nice sharp blade. If you have a blunt blade, good bloody luck, you're going to hate yourself and you're probably going to end up cutting yourself. Sometimes a sharp knife is actually safer. There's another thing about that. It's bloody messy when you do this stuff. And finally, we have to cork the gaps so water doesn't get behind the background. Because grout is water resistant, not waterproof. And to be completely fair with you, nothing really is waterproof. Water will always find a way out eventually. If you don't take any consideration whatsoever or maintenance along the way, it will always find a way. It's a sneaky little fucker. You'd think that this big red thing here, this big flappy red thing, is basically just like a mouse pad. It turns out the mouse doesn't really function on it. Bit of a pain in the ass, bit of behind the scenes as to the problems I'm dealing with, but yeah, what a waste of money. I've tried to give it a little bit of texture there and there, so it's more like Gizmo's rather than like Greta and Gabby's, where it's kind of a flat finish. I just think this might look a little bit better. As things always tend to happen, this doesn't look anything like I planned in my head. I wanted it to be kind of like a Lion King thing, so I wanted to kind of have Pride Rock in the enclosure. But then I kind of realized that it doesn't really work, because it would be such a large portion just kind of in the center of the enclosure, and none of the animals I have would really benefit from it. So instead what I did was I've done a platform up here, because the snake that's going to be going in here is semi-arboreal. It's very strong, and even though she's an adult female ball python, she's not going to damage or break that. We've got a section under here which is going to be kind of like a hide. I was thinking about maybe doing some kind of a humid hide here, and then providing something here, maybe like a cork bark sheet, cut it to size. If I don't want to make it permanent like this, if I ever need to get her out for whatever reason, like if there's another mite infestation or anything like that, I can take it out and I can get access to her. She's not trapped and I'm not forced to break the background to actually get to her. Now on this side of the enclosure, I haven't put anything in interactive really. It's more of a decorative thing. I was going to grout it tonight, but it is getting a bit late. And there are some elements that are still a bit wet. So some of the glue's a little bit wet. I've also corked the perimeter along the top where there was a gap and in a couple of areas. So I don't want to grout it until that's fully dry. And I also don't have a grout brush on me. I've got the grout, but I don't really feel like just throwing it at the background. It's not the cleanest way of doing things anyway. It would be entertaining for you guys, but I don't think we need to go to that extreme. So we're going to make a jump forward in time to where we're actually grouting this thing. Okay, and we are back. Following night, so everything should be dry now in our lovely enclosure, which it is. Hold on, I'll just turn the lights back on. And there we go. All looks to be dry now. Ready for the next stage, which is obviously going to be grouting this. So these are all the various grouts that I've got here. This one here is the one that I used for Gizmo, Greta, and Gabby's enclosure, color of which is DeLorean Gray. And as I said, I thought that was a little bit light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine this bag, the light gray that's in there, I'm going to combine that bag of light gray with this bag here, which is charcoal color. So I think mixing those two together, because this is almost a black, and we know the color of that one. I've got two enclosures with that. Hoping this will come out to be a bit of a darker gray towards black. I'd rather it be more gray than black, but we'll find a middle ground. Just so I've got to mix this up, obviously. I've got to tape around the enclosure where I don't want the grout to actually go, and then we can get started on this. It's definitely darker than the one I used for Gizmo, Gabby, and Greta's enclosures. So we'll see how far this one gets me. The only thing that I did make a slight mistake, whereas I just randomly mixed this, so I can't make the exact same color again because I don't know what the ratios were. But a lot of little learning curves that I'm being faced with during these enclosure builds. So one thing to take note is obviously it looks quite dark at the moment, but it always dries lighter than the color it is when it's wet. So let's see how this goes. Start grouting it now and I'll put you on a time lapse, the famous time lapse that we've grown to love over these last few builds. And give this a shot. Right, so we're on to grouting this bugger now. This is also quite a time-consuming process, nowhere near as time-consuming as carving the but one thing about grouting the background is that you always grout it a particular color, and by the time you finish grouting the background, you're accustomed to the color. But then at the back of your head, you know that as it dries, it's going to lighten. So once I'd mixed this, I was like, I should have made it darker. It's mixed now. I guess I could have put more powder in it, mixed it again. This is looking back at a previous version of myself. So, side note, you guys can have a bit of a chuckle on my behalf here. The entire time I've been filming this, during the process of the insulation at least, so the putting in the insulation, the carving, the caulking, and the grouting as we just did now, I've been sweating like a maniac, and I had no idea why, and the temperature is consistent in here. So for the longest time I'm going, why am I so warm? I'm barely doing anything. And then I looked up. That right there is a heat vent directly from the furnace. Literally maybe a 10-foot run from the furnace. So that's probably the hottest point in this shop, is directly below this bloody thing. But I struggled through it because I'm a legend. However, I do wish I'd known that it was there, or acknowledged at least that it was there, and I'd have moved this bugger somewhere else, or just redirected it slightly. Because man, I've been sweating I've been sweating a lot. We'll just leave it at that. So I used the drill with a spade bit to kind of give me some indent areas so I didn't just have to cut it, because when I cut it with a knife, I can only get it to be kind of like a straight cut. So to get these kind of indent kind of things where they're kind of messy looking, I used the drill and a spade bit, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. So that's another useful thing that I've now figured out how to do. The fact that it lightened up as much as it did, not overly fond with, a little bit light. I would have preferred it to be a little bit more dark. But as you can see, our kind of build-up thing actually looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. And an interesting idea that I have would be to maybe try and build an enclosure where that goes through the entirety of it. So you have like a second platform that's almost through the entire enclosure. That would need to be an animal that's capable of getting up and around it quite easily, but there's plenty of animals out there that are capable of that. So that's something that I'd like to try in the future. Or maybe even incorporating like a twig, putting like some cork bark or some twigs inside it and having it kind of rear off in different directions. That might be a cool idea as well. Lots of little creative things we could try here. However, I didn't do them on this quad-plex, so on the next build we'll be doing those things. Remember a second ago I said that I think that this mat is f***ed. I think it's the mouse, because I've tried doing it on this black shit. It's worse, but that it is rubbery, so I should have thought about that. And then I've tried it on just the table. It still doesn't really respond. I guess like a $15 mouse off Amazon, that's what you'd expect. But it's the only one I got here at the moment, so bloody well work, you wanker. I'm going to toss you at the wall. So the next step is to do the highlight painting. So I've got 4 different colors here: brown, gray, green, and a black, and we can mix them together to see what kind of in-between colors we get. So we're going to do some highlight painting now, which is really what makes this pop. Now, I've only done the highlight painting on 2 enclosures, Gizmo's and then Greta and Gabby's. But after I did it, it really made the enclosure pop and look a lot more naturalistic. So I'm excited to do it again, but with more colors this time. Another thing that I have is a handful of decorations that we'll put inside as well. I didn't want to get too many because she's going to have a fair number of hides in here. These are just to make the background look a little bit nicer. Anyway, I'm going to set you back up on the old tripod there, which I think I broke. It's a good thing I'm in a construction shop. You might end up just being put on a piece of wood. But That's my problem, not yours. So we're on the detail painting now. This part is actually quite fun. I actually quite enjoy doing this. I will also say that with each enclosure for the quad-plex that I do, it begins to look better, more naturalistic. So when I did Greta and Gabby's enclosure, there's quite a few areas in there that look like I've just put a paintbrush on the wall, which I did. It's not really the effect I was trying to go for though, right? In this one, it looks like that in some areas, mainly with the green and the brown, but it is better than the one that I did for Greta and Gabby. The final one that I did, which is at the bottom of the enclosure for a snake called Astro, his is perfect. Like, I think his is the best one I've ever done. So I am improving and getting better. For those of you curious on how to do this, and you don't have time to finish all of Bob Ross's videos, what you want to do is you want to dip your paintbrush in the paint, kind of like I'm doing here, and you want to remove as much residue as you can to where when you're pretty much brushing that paint, no green paint, brown paint, whatever color paint you're using, comes off. Then you brush it over those areas of the background. And if there isn't enough green, you do that same process of rubbing it off, but you do it slightly less. Or if you want less green, then you do that same process, but you rub off even more. I feel like men are going to be better at rubbing off the brush more than women, just because we get a lot of rubbing experience during our high school years. Now, if you're noticing that the camera slightly shifted a bit, it's because it has. The battery died and I couldn't get the camera to line up perfectly the same, so you are where you are. Apologies. Now we're adding the decorations, as we did with Greta and Gabby and Gizmo's enclosure. Now this is a real testament to how strong you are, because some of these decorations have these very little string pieces of metal coming out. So you can stab those in the insulation, not really a problem. The big ones have strings coming out, but some of them are like that. And getting that into the background is a bitch, and it makes you feel like a little bitch. So, as you can see, at some point, I resorted to a hammer and a drill bit to make a pre-hole for me. So there we have it, background finished. It's been carved, well, it's been installed, carved, grouted, painted, decorated. Lovely, done, looks absolutely gorgeous. Our little cubby hole there. Well, if that's not evidence of me watching this alongside you, I don't know what would be. So let's turn myself down, because we don't want to listen at this point. We don't want two versions of myself talking. That one also sounds more muffled than I do, because there's a bit of an echo in here, so I have to be a little bit more quiet. Pretty much what I did with the glass was I bought these little plastic things that go at the bottom and the top. I just bought them off Amazon. They're quite expensive, actually. I think they were like 80 bucks each. So we're going to jump back into where this guy was talking, and I'm going to shut up. Right, shove a ton of it in our little cubby hole there, which I don't think this snake will really even end up using, but they'll use the platform at least. And now Hydra is a ball python, so obviously she's not going to be digging, but I still want to give her a pretty good base, and she also needs it relatively humid, so this will provide a good amount of humidity, or at least it will hold a lot of the moisture anyway. Probably got enough in my little tub here to finish Hydras off. Let's spread that around a wee little bit there. This is quite an awkward location to film this enclosure. I've got to be hunched over. I'm kind of in the position of the Hunchback of the Notre Dame over here. Hopefully my house doesn't burn down though. Now Hydra will use height. I provided Hydra with height before and she always uses it. So I know she'll use this, especially at night, which is when she mainly comes out. And I need to give her a nice thick branch to where she can get to, but I don't want her to be able to tip this over and break the glass. So it's in a bit of a dilemma as to what orientation do we put this twig to where she doesn't do any damage. Just trying to put weight on it in every way possible. What are you doing? What are you doing, you little bugger? Are there children outside? Is that why you're barking? Switch that up, maybe. You know what, this might actually be the hardest part of making these enclosures, is designing them once they're finished. Setting up where everything's going to go, where the hides are going to go, where the decorations are going to go, where the water bowl's going to go. Now obviously some of that's dependent upon where the heat elements are. That's the part that takes the longest, it seems. Because you make it, you put it in a particular way, and you look at it from a distance, you go, nah. And then you put it in another particular way, and then you look at it from a distance and you go, nah. Because you're about to see that I obviously decided to go a particular way, and then without context completely change it and didn't film the change. Because I didn't even acknowledge that I was doing it. It's a problem, I need help. I mean, just when you think I'm done, I pull out another long piece of wood. Where do I keep getting this stuff from? So I know that this one looks a wee bit busy, but Hydra is the snake that I handled the least, so I don't really need to worry too much about things being in the way. And then this long twig here I can just take out anyway. But I need something to weigh this hide down, otherwise she'll just move it. And then this black hide here I've wedged in position with the water bowl, and then this top piece, so she also can't move that. So let's throw in the leaf litter, just toss in the white rocks, and then put the glass back. Then we're going to leave this enclosure for a week for it to warm up and everything before I put her in here, because I ran out of mulch, so I had to go buy more. So this mulch is actually quite cold to the touch. So I don't want to put her in here until it's warm. And then I also want to assess the temperatures a little bit more in here. Before I put them in here, I want them to be perfectly set up. So I just know that their stress level will just be because it's a different environment, not because the husbandry is wrong. Now, obviously, the snake that's going in here, you already know is a ball python. And at the moment, she's just in this bin, just so it's easier for me to get a hold of her. There you go. You ready to go into your new enclosure? And there she is, doing what all ball pythons do, which is pretty much just sit around. So I'll give her some time and see what she gets up to. Now, obviously, she's a ball python, so it took her about an hour from being in that ball to get the courage to progress on to doing anything. And she made a beeline, pretty much. That beeline wasn't fast, it was ball python beeline, so it took about 30 minutes. But she found the closest hide and went towards it. But to be fair, that is pretty much what ball pythons do a lot of the time, is they like to be hidden, especially during the day, and at night time they'll come out. So that's why I have the platform in this enclosure for Hydra, because Hydra does tend to come out at night and try and go up to wherever the highest point of her enclosure is that she can reach. She'll tend to go there. So I wanted to give her a platform so she could sit somewhere comfortably, because like the branches in here, they're good for her to climb on, but they're not really good for her to like sit on. She's just too big for them. And she's not a particularly big ball python, about mid-size, and she's pretty much a very typical ball python. You pick her up, she turns into a ball, and that's pretty much about it. The one positive thing about Hydra, now when I say one positive thing, I don't mean there's only one positive thing. What I mean by that is that ball pythons tend to be a little bit picky, or iffy we can say, when it comes to feeding frequency. She does not have that issue. I think in the entire time I've owned her, which is probably 3 or 4 years now, she's refused food twice. Twice. That's it. She's a maniac when it comes to food. So there we go. That is the first video of us housing a quad-plex animal. Hydra, the first resident of our quad-plex.